Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ, and in this one it's actually more like me asking the question because I'm curious your opinion on whether Chinese fantasy novels are, generally speaking, predictable or not. Now, predictable is a word that I kind of have had issues with in the past. Before we get too deeply into predictability, let's define what we're talking about. I'm going to pull up, here's dictionary.com. And the definition for predictable is able to be foretold or declared in advance. And number 2 definition is expected, especially on the basis of previous or known behavior. Then here's Merriam-Webster, basically similar definitions. Capable of being predicted, able to be known, seen, or declared in advance. In fact, right here we have an example, a very predictable plot. And then definition number 2, behaving in a way that is expected. Now, I have a take on what people mean when they say predictable, because as you can see, the inherent in this definition is capable of being predicted, both in Merriam-Webster and also here in dictionary.com, able to be foretold or declared in advance. So if something is predictable, you should be able to predict that it is going to happen. What I have found is that a lot of people don't actually use predictable in this way. When they say something is predictable, it's more along the lines of when something happened that wasn't very unexpected. I have seen this many times when I post my translations where something will happen in the plot that is not a general obvious plot thing. So like the good guy is going to kill the bad guy at the end is kind of like something that is probably pretty easy to predict. I'm talking about more specific plot developments where, you know, something would happen and then readers in the comment section would be saying, this story is so predictable. Eventually I started taking issue with that, and in some of my translations I would respond in the comment section and say, okay, if this story is predictable, why don't you predict what's going to happen? You know, the chapters come out on a regular schedule. You can very easily post a comment saying what you think is going to happen in the next chapter. Now, the vast majority of people actually don't take up that challenge. And my theory is because actually things are not necessarily as easy to predict as people claim they are. And again, that's why I say most people, when they say predictable, what they really mean is that the way it turned out was not anything that caught them by surprise. Well, there are some people who will take up that challenge. Throughout the years, I've had people who make a big deal of trying to predict things in response to my challenge to do so. What I found was that in the vast majority of instances, they could not predict what was going to happen in the story. Now, maybe you're different. Maybe you're a person who really can predict what's going to happen in a story. Again, I would like to emphasize that I'm not talking about the major, obvious, huge plot developments that we come to expect. You know, if you know a writer and the style and the kind of genre that they're doing, you can probably figure out, okay, the good guy is going to win in the end, or you know, he might enter a darkest moment of his hero's journey, roughly 3/4 of the way through the story or 2/3 or something. Those kind of things are different. I'm more talking about the specific plot twists and turns that people claim are predictable. So that's my hot take on predictability, is that most people don't actually use it in the way it's defined in the dictionary. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree? I'd love to hear your comments. Let's talk about predictability specifically in Chinese fantasy novels, and even more specifically, the web novels. Now, web novels are different from traditional fiction. They are serialized, they are generally very long, and the authors often post new content on a very regular basis, usually daily, sometimes multiple times per day. I think that when you are an individual author, it's probably difficult to avoid being predictable at a certain point. When you're putting out thousands of chapters and you're doing it at a rapid pace, you don't have time necessarily to sit down and do a detailed outline of your master plan. Now, to be fair, from what I understand, many, if not most, of the Chinese web novel authors, they do work off of an outline. They plan out their story in advance, and then they will refine the outline and change it as they need, but they do have a general idea where they're going. Not in every case, and I'm sure some of you are going to cite certain very long novels such as Martial God Asura, which I have heard, and I have not read this novel myself, but I have heard that every plot arc is almost the same and it happens in the same way every single time with very tiny variations. So I think that's a good example of how when you keep going on and on, it becomes difficult to avoid becoming predictable. And then that's not to mention the fact that the genre itself has a lot of authors producing a lot of content, leading to a massive amount of content. And there are obviously genre tropes that are going to be easy to identify. You know, when that young master comes out and starts insulting the main character, there are only a few ways that can turn out. generally speaking. And so I think that kind of scenario makes it easier on the side of predictability. As I've mentioned in previous videos, my area of expertise lies on the language and culture side, on the translating side. I have not read a massive amount of Chinese web novel fiction the way that many of you in my audience have. So I'm definitely curious about your take on this. One comment that I have seen over and over and over again on different videos and on other different forums is that a lot of readers get burned out and they kind of stop reading them because the novels become, in the words of the readers, so predictable. So what is your take on predictability? One other thing I wanted to show is over here, I was searching for articles about fiction being predictable, and I think you can see here there's about 9 million results. And I read some of them. I don't have it on my history on this browser, so you can't see which ones I read. But I'm obviously not the first person to talk about this. One thing I saw many articles mentioning is that being predictable isn't necessarily bad, and what's more important is treading the line properly between something that is predictable and unpredictable, because there are good aspects of predictability, and you do want to write stories in a way that the reader will feel like they're reading something that they are familiar with, or that they understand. If you're constantly making everything unpredictable, then that might not be a very fun reading experience. But again, I'm interested in your take. Please do leave a comment below. And if you like the kind of content I generate, please do all of those things that everybody tells you to do, liking and subscribing and all that stuff. And as of now, I know I've been saying this for like a year or two or something, my channel is still demonetized. So if you can support the channel in any way, that would be very much appreciated. I have links in the description below for many different ways to do that. That's it for this video. I will see you next time. Gautzla.